Welcome, welcome, welcome to Arts in April. Thank you for coming. This is our kickoff event. I want to let you know, though, that every month is a good month for the arts. And I've dedicated myself in my years teaching here, which are far too many to count, of bringing students to museums, plays, readings, and other events. And oftentimes students tell me, I didn't think I was going to enjoy this, but that was pretty good. Okay, and hopefully, we turn someone on to enjoying the arts and participating in the arts, as we are doing here. And I think North Shore is a really cool environment for that. We really are committed and dedicated. And today we're really punching above our weight, okay, in a big way. And we have a New York Times Bestseller author, Allegra Goodman, with us here today. Allegra is also a frequent New Yorker contributor. Her stories have been anthologized in Best American Short Stories, and Allegra has been given so many awards I can't even really count or list them. But I want to share you a little anecdote with how all of this has come about. Carl Carlson, who is here with us today, founder of the... stand up? No? A wave? Okay. Inaugurated this visiting writers program long ago. And I took over from John Zamparelli, who's not here with us today. He's recovering from a ski injury. And they were big shoes to follow, big act to follow. And so initially, I was chasing a poet laureate, and things looked really, really good with the poet laureate until they ghosted me. And I got all kinds of nervous until a buddy texted me, have you read Allegra Goodman's book, Sam? It's about a young woman growing up in Beverly and attending North Shore Community College. And I'm thinking, whoa. And I got the book, and Sam could be any one of you, any one of our students. It was just amazing. And then, in addition, as I was advising a student last week, I was thinking of the kind of experience that Allegra develops for Sam at North Shore, where the faculty goes out of their way to help the student find their dreams, find their path. And I'm chilled by all of this, because this is the life I lead that I'm reading about. And I reached out to Allegra because I feel she had reached out to us, and she agreed to come and join us today. So, without any further ado, I give you Allegra Goodman.
Thank you so much. It's so much fun to be here. I've spoken at other colleges and universities, but I have never spoken before at my character's alma mater. So it's like a full circle moment for me. This means a lot. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my book, Sam, which some of you have read, some of you read some of it, some of you are starting it in the middle of it, and a little bit about... and I'll focus a little bit about how the connection between her and North Shore, which is where she ends up going to school. Long story short, I am a writer. I've been a writer for a long time, since I was quite young. I grew up really, really far away from here, and I've met some skiers. I know some of your faculty ski. I grew up in a place where there is no skiing at all. I don't know if you can guess where that might be, but I grew up in Honolulu. And the people I knew in school were surfers, not skiers. And it was all about water sports where I grew up. The gods of my high school were the water polo players. But I ended up living in New England And I've lived here for quite a while, and I've written about all kinds of people and in all kinds of places. In my earliest work, I write short stories as well as novels, and my earliest work is sort of satirical short stories. I wrote a book called Total Immersion and a book called The Family Markowitz, which are linked stories. And I have written about a group of observant Jews who summer in upstate New York in a novel called Catterskill Falls, which was my first novel. I've written about scientists who work in Cambridge, which is where I live. I live in Cambridge, quite close to MIT. And I wrote a book called Intuition about researchers in a cancer lab. I don't know if any of you are studying science. And I've written about tech moguls in a book called The Cookbook Collector, and about teachers and video gamers in a novel called The Chalk Artist. But I've always been interested in all of my work, even though I've written about many different kinds of people. I've been interested in writing about people from the inside, because I think that's what fiction can really do for you. If you're writing an article about somebody, or if you're writing a history, you want to be objective and you want to write about what people did. If you're writing fiction, you can write about what people feel. You can write about what people say, but what they might be thinking the opposite. If you were writing a play, all that you can produce is the dialogue of what people say, and maybe in their eyes you can see the opposite. But in fiction, you can also write their thoughts, and that really always interested me about my particular vocation. And in this case, I started getting interested in writing about girlhood, about writing about a young girl growing up, but doing it from the inside. Intimately, so that the character feels the reader feels what the character is feeling and sees what the character sees. So the character always comes first for me as a novelist, and when I started writing this book, the character of Sam came first. So Sam is a novel that starts out when a young girl is 7 years old and shows how she grows up into being a young adult, probably about your age for the students here, maybe a little younger, start college age. And it's written in a very close third-person point of view. So it's interesting to me. There was even a review which said it was in the first person because it feels very intimate and personal the way it's written. So you'd think it was like Sam saying, I did this and I went there and I saw that. But it's always in the third person, but it's so close to her that it feels like she's telling the story. And the voice of the book almost feels like her voice because it's her thoughts and her perceptions that we experience. And Sam lives in Beverly. She doesn't live in Honolulu, where I grew up, or in Cambridge, where I live now, but she lives in Beverly. And the reason that she lives in Beverly is when I was writing this book, one of my sons was going to school in Beverly. And I was driving him every day from Cambridge up to Beverly, which is about 45 minutes without traffic. And it was a reverse commute, so we'd drive up, like the highway would be like a parking lot on the other side, and we'd be like zipping, but it was like 45-minute drive. And then I'd pick him up at 2:15, and so I spent his school day working in Beverly. Since I'm a writer, I can work in many places. And I worked up there, and I got to know the town of Beverly. I rented a small office on Cabot Street, not far from the Cabot Theater. And I would every day I would get out of the car, and we'd be exhausted because we had to get up very early, like at 6:15, get going and get into the car, and we'd drive up there, and I'd drive him at his school, and then I'd drive over to Cabot Street, and I'd park on Washington Street, which is right near the ocean. And every day I'd go and look at the ocean. I'd be like, try to take a breath, as I was very tired all the time. And I got to know how beautiful it is up here. And I am an ocean person because I grew up on an island, although my ocean was the Pacific Ocean and much warmer than this ocean. So I started thinking about a young girl who was growing up in Beverly. And I thought about it as I walked along the beach and as I walked along Cabot Street, which has its, if you've been there, the YMCA, the big brick YMCA, and the church there, and there are a lot of consignment stores there, and there's a coffee shop called the Atomic Cafe, I think. I think I changed the name slightly in my book. And I saw the dollar store that was there. And all of those sort of, I started thinking about this girl living in this place. And I, as a writer, I just watch everything and I observe everything. So I started writing it up there. And my idea for writing this book was, as I said, from the inside, but that you would see this girl growing before your eyes, almost like a time-lapse photograph where you see like a flower opening or a seed sprouting. But I didn't have, since I'm not a filmmaker, I didn't have images. I had to do that process with words. So what I did was I used the words that were simple that she would know when she was young, and then as she gets older and her mind grows and her heart opens and her understanding becomes more sophisticated, the language that I used to describe her also expands with her. So I did my time lapse in words. I definitely drew upon my own experience of growing up, and also on my experience being a parent writing this book. Sam's parents are very important characters in the book. She has a father who's somewhat unreliable and has some issues, and she has a mom who's like a rock and kind of holds everything together. And I was really interested in writing about parenting from the child's point of view, the way that as a kid you look at your parents one way, and then as you get older, your understanding changes and you start seeing them as people. And that's part of the process of growing up in this book. One of the questions that I had when I was writing this novel, and like a researcher as a novelist, I often start with a question. I was always interested in when kids are little and they have so much energy and hope and ambition and optimism, and they're always rushing around. Kids don't sort of walk from place to place. They run from place to place. And even as a child, I noticed that adults were always like slowly walking. I was like, what? Why are they so slow? And why are they always talking about how tired they are? I mean, later as I got older, I figured out why they were so tired, which was partly because they were taking care of the kids. But I was really curious thinking back to my years as a small child and also watching my own little daughter when she was so energetic. She would be like literally climbing the walls. And then, what happens to that energy and that ambition in little kids as they get older and get to be a teenager or a young adult? Where does that go? Especially for girls. What happens when disappointment creeps in? When things aren't quite as good as they thought they might be? When the outside pressures of life come upon you, when our sick culture puts pressure on you as a girl? And that was a big question that I had. And this novel, the plot of this novel really is how Sam comes through that. She starts out as this energetic, spunky kid, and she gets older and she suffers a bit and she is disappointed and she grieves and then what happens? Where does she come out of that? And part of how she comes out of that is that she goes to college, and she starts attending class at North Shore. The campus that she goes to is in Danvers. And the reason I chose the Danvers campus for Sam was I thought it was convenient for her. I thought it would be the natural place for her to go. And also my son's high school, which was in Beverly, had a program where if you were qualified as a senior, you could try out what college might be like by taking a class at the Danvers campus. So I would go pick him up from there several times a week, so I got to know that parking lot and those buildings over there, which is why I chose that place. So I could envision it when I was writing, and I like to be able to have seen a place before I write about it. So, the church that Sam climbs is a church that I've looked at and seen those brick walls. And the YMCA that she practices climbing in is a building that I know. And North Shore, Danvers, is a building. Those are buildings that I know. So, a big part of what happens in Sam's life is her decision to go to college and to go to North Shore. And she's not somebody who is automatically going to go to college when she's in high school. She wants to get a job and help her mom and earn some money now, and she doesn't particularly like studying much, and her mom is always nagging her to register, which makes her push back. So I would say she's a bit of a reluctant student, and she fights a lot about going. And then when she does go to college, she becomes kind of intrigued by what she finds there, and that's also part of her development as a person. So I'm just going to read to you like 2 really short passages, and these are passages from when she's at North Shore. This is like her first day going to North Shore. And this is my impression. If you've seen the Danvers campus, I don't know if you'll agree with me or like if you'll recognize things, but the building at North Shore is mostly glass, so you can see into some smaller lectures. Sam peeks in and wonders what other people are studying, and if they like it, and if they want to be here. Outside, you can hear the wind in the trees. Inside, she sits in one of those chairs with a desk that swings over your lap. First up is stats. It's analyzing data. You put in the numbers, but software will do a lot of the work. There will be a midterm and a final and weekly problem sets. The instructor, Gary Bowen, says, "Please do not use computers in my class," so Sam takes out a notebook. As usual, she has the most school supplies of anyone, and that's because her mom works at Staples, so she gets the employee discounts. Her mom is always like giving her like as much as she can. Her mom got her red, yellow, green, and black notebooks, and mechanical pencils, and gel pens, and highlighters, and note cards. Okay, Bowen says, let's dive right in. The lecture is about data and how to display it in graphs and charts and other ways. Every once in a while, Bowen says something interesting, and then he says, "Side note," and Sam perks up. Side note, there is a really good book you can get called How to Lie with Statistics. Pretty much all numbers can be manipulated in the news and politics. That is a takeaway. Other people are scribbling in blue ballpoint, in pencil, in black pen. Accounting is taught by this happy older woman named Mary Witchey. She tells the class she is originally from Tennessee. Her hair is white blonde. Her shoes are stiletto heels, which seem a little bit insane. Then again, Witchey is a tiny person. Maybe she needs them so you can see her at the board. She's like a country music singer in love with equations. She sings out, "Assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. Say it with me." She draws a great big T on the whiteboard, and she says, "Now listen up, because this little critter is the basis of accounting." Sam does listen. She even chants the equation, and at the same time, she can't wait to leave. So that's her first day. And then I'm just going to read you one more passage where she's sort of getting into her studies. And she's starting to, she wants to decide she wants to do well. And she's starting to work really hard. But she also has a job. And she also has her little brother to help out with. And she has her mom who needs help. And she's exhausted. Sam has done hard things before. She's climbed gnarly boulders and banged her knees and cut her hand. She's hung onto a ledge and pulled up, straining every muscle. This is different. She's worn out in her heart and mind. In accounting, Witchey's favorite equation is success equals effort plus time. Do you think that's true? Sam asks everybody when they're smoking out at Red Rocks, these are her climbing buddies that she goes to meet. Yeah, definitely, says Justin. But Amber disagrees. People always say that, but actually you can work and work forever, and it doesn't help. You don't get anywhere. Always look on the bright side, says Sean. Well, says Amber, it's the truth. Kyle says, maybe it depends on the job. Sam adds, or the person. There's talent, Amber says. It should be success equals effort plus talent. Plus, what's the other one? Time. Look at Bolt here. That's the dog, Kyle says. I tried to teach him tricks. He never learned anything. What, are you saying he's not talented, says Justin? Come here, boy. You're the one without talent, Sean teases Kyle. They're all sitting on the ground, and Sam is sitting between Justin's legs. Amber tells them, get a room. Justin risks even more teasing, leaning over Sam. Maybe I should take you home. She says, no, I'm okay. Sam's mom says she should cut back her hours at work and concentrate on school. But Sam already has cut back at UPS, and she needs cash. How else will she pay for gas and car repairs, not to mention stuff she might actually want, like climbing shoes? Can't you just take one class at a time, Amber says now. Sam says, yeah, but then I'd be in school the rest of my life. Amber considers this. Okay, that's fair. You got this, Sean cheers Sam. Get it over with, says Kyle. It's not all bad, Sam says. I'm taking an elective. The way it happened was one day she looked through the glass wall and saw a guy showing one of those volcano videos. The room was dark, but the instructor saw Sam watching. He looked straight at her, and she shrank back. Then he beckoned, and she slipped inside the door. Come join us, the instructor said. There were only a handful of students. So he's probably trying to recruit one more. If you're looking for earth science, this is the place. His name is Professor Martin Green, but he goes by Doc Martin. That first day, he talked about how the whole world was in flux, which made her think of bubbling cheese pizza. He said, you can't even keep up with the map. Some islands are growing, some are disappearing. Climate change is heating up the earth and causing sea levels to rise, but at the same time, after a volcano erupts, the ocean cools and sea levels decrease. Then all at once, Sam asked a question without even realizing it. So they equal out? Doc Martin looked at her like, oh, hello. And Sam was embarrassed, but she had to ask, do climate change and cooling oceans cancel each other? Good question, said Doc Martin. They do not. The ocean cools after a volcano erupts, but climate change keeps heating continuously. This is the kind of thing we try to measure. Then after class, Doc Martin came up to Sam and said, good to meet you. He was tall and heavy with a big beard. He wore a checked shirt, but the checks were tiny compared to him. Hi, I'm Sam, she said. And then she confessed, I'm not registered. Doc Martin said, well, we can change that. Thank you. So if you guys have any questions about the book, about writing, about any of the stuff, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes?
Do you feel like you relate to Sam and the struggles that she went through growing up?
Definitely. I mean, and this is the weird thing about writing a novel. I do relate to her, although my experience is very different from hers. And that's interesting, right? Like, you can relate to somebody who's quite different. I grew up far from her, right? Thousands of miles away. I grew up in different circumstances. You know, my dad is not a magician. But I was a girl, you know, and I grew up to be a parent, so I also relate to Sam's mom and some of the struggles that she had, although have not been a single mom. So, you know, I do relate, and I think it's sort of an imaginative leap that you have to make as a writer to relate to somebody different. People often say to writers, you know, write about what you know, but if you only write about what you know and you only write about yourself, then you're kind of limited. So you also have to observe and watch other people and look for connections. And when you start writing that way, there are places of connection and places where you relate and places of difference that you have to kind of make that leap. I did not attend, you know, North Shore Community College Danvers campus. I saw some of it, and I tried to use my imagination and what I knew of my character to imagine what her experience would be like there. I have taught classes, but you know, never earth science. But I could use my imagination to think my way into that. That's why, for me, it's the greatest compliment in the world to be invited to Sam's college and to hear from a professor at North Shore that he thought like Sam seemed like some of his students. That meant like I did my job, you know, like that's what writers live for, you know. So, long answer to your question.
So you've written about many different communities, the biomedical community, the Jewish community, the youth community, and obviously you haven't lived through all of those different experiences. How do you do the research to kind of fill in all of these gaps to get these details?
Yeah, so to do research for a novel is different than like doing research for a research paper, or if a journalist was doing research. You sort of start from the facts and then you kind of move away from it. So, but I did a lot of research. So part of my research is experiential. So I did research in the North Shore by, you know, spending my daylight hours there, many of my daylight hours there, and walking around and looking at places and just thinking. I also did a lot of research on climbing by just watching people climb, whether that was like out in the woods, like on a hike, seeing people bouldering, as you do, you know, out there, or by watching videos of climbing competitions and thinking about those things. So I would say, like, so watching and then reading about climbing. I spent time, for this book, it was just like a lot of thinking and researching about climbing and experience on the North Shore. For other books, you know, I've done a lot of reading. for other projects. It just depends where, but I've been very open to looking at different sources. I also did a lot of research by being a mom and watching my daughter and seeing what she went through. My daughter was not a climber. She was a dancer growing up, but some of the same issues apply. And I played violin when I was a little girl, and I was really interested in a few things about children's activities, whether it's dancing, running, sports, climbing, skating. The way that when you're little you really enjoy it, and then there's this sort of competitive part that creeps in, and if you can kind of maintain the joy after that. I was also really interested in the way an activity can mean something different for you when you're like in middle school, for when you're in college, for when you're an adult. Climbing has different meanings for Sam throughout her life. Another thing this is a counter kind of research, or reverse engineering, that you can do as a writer. I'm really interested in not writing a cliched book. There's certain tropes that you have where, like, girl in a small town, she has this amazing talent. It's going to, like, shoot her to stardom and fame, and, like, it's going to, I'm thinking of, like, a movie like Billy Elliot, which is a movie about a little boy whose parents are, like, whose dad is a coal miner, his mom is dead, and he has this incredible gift for dancing, and even though he overcomes all these odds, and he gets a scholarship to the great dance academy, and he becomes a great dancer. And there's many, many sort of wish fulfillment fairy tale-like books like that and films like that. Girl has a beautiful voice. She ends up, becoming a great singer. There's a million different ways that story has been written. And I was interested in writing a story about somebody who grew up. Sam is gifted. She's smart. She's got lots of talent. She's a good climber. She's not going to be the best climber in the world. She's not going to make the national team, and that's not going to transform her life. I was interested in somebody growing up the hard way or the real way, where it's like she's good. That's not going to solve her problems. It's not like the get out of town free ticket. So I do some of my research by looking at like popular culture and doing the opposite, or doing something that feels more authentic to me, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Mark. I had one comment and then one question. I love this book, and I couldn't put it down. I was sort of shooing away the dog and just read it in one fell swoop. And I just wanted to say that the scene that really hooked me and that I experienced in a visceral way was when Sam is locked out of the house by her mom's horrible boyfriend. Like, you got me with that scene, and I just had to see how Sam ended up from there. So I really loved your novel. My question is, how does a person find out that a person's book has been selected for this prestigious national book club? What's that like, and how does that feel?
So there's a person named Jenna Bush Hager has a book club on the Today Show. And every month she chooses a new book. And she chooses them 6 months before the book is published. So my book was published on January 3rd, and she picked my book in May before that. So I think the way it happens is that she's actually really a reader. She loves reading, and her passion is literacy and reading. And she's the daughter of former President Bush and Laura Bush, who used to be a librarian. And as a first lady, her platform was really literacy. She was a librarian and teacher, and Laura Bush, Jenna's mom, founded the National Book Festival in D.C. on the Mall and all this stuff. So I think my theory, Jenna never told me this, my theory is that, Jenna kind of is carrying that on, and she has like a big platform because she has a daily live morning television show, the Today Show. So she doesn't have to choose to spotlight a book or an author or encourage people on social media to read or have a reading streak. She doesn't have to do any of that, but she believes in it and she loves reading and she wants to share that. So she read the book, loved the book, and contacted my editor and my publisher. And then they told me in May, and they told me I wasn't allowed to tell anyone about it, as these book clubs go. This isn't the only book club. There are other. Oprah still has a book club. Reese Witherspoon, the actress and director and producer and mogul, has a book club, and there are other ones as well. But there's sort of an effort, which is lovely, that to say, hey, you guys, read this. This is amazing. Like, this is fun. Like, I related to it. And so it was a surreal experience, but it was all like I got these emails. Like, she didn't call me. My editor told me. And then I was told, don't tell anyone about it. And it was so far in advance, I kind of forgot about it. And then it was like, oh, you have to go to New York. You have to go sit with her and talk to her, which is a very surreal experience for a writer.
I too really enjoyed reading your novel, and you talked at the beginning about the fact that it's written in the third person, and it almost doesn't feel like that. One of the things that I thought was so fascinating when I read it is that it's in the third person and the present tense, which I think is sort of a more unique combination to put those two together. And I was just wondering if you could say more about why you chose that combination to convey this story.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So I've written books in the past tense as well, and this book really felt like I wanted to do it in the present tense so that you would be right there with Sam in the moment. It's almost like a filmic feeling. So it's not like, when she was 7, she did this, and but Sam is 7, she sees this, she does this. It has that immediacy that I was going for. So just like a painter chooses different colors to convey different emotions or different images, writers, we have diction, we have our word choice, and we can choose tense and the voice of the book. So for this project, I thought the present tense would give that sense of immediacy to the reader.
Anyone else?
Yep.
What advice do you have for aspiring writers in the audience?
Aspiring writers, I have a few pieces of advice. So first of all, excuse me, observe things, observe people. Listen as much as you can to the way people really talk around you. Watch things, be a watcher, be an observer. And then my other piece of advice is to read as much as you possibly can. The more you read, the richer your choices will be as a writer. You'll see what people have done, and don't think of it as like something intimidating to see what people have done, but think of it as you will then enter into conversation with what people have done, and that will enrich your work. I think the best young writers are the ones who observe the most and listen the most and read the most.
Okay.
Oh, there's somebody over here.
Where are you?
Thank you for coming, Allegra. This was awesome. I just have 2 quick questions. One, who is your favorite character that you've written about, and are you currently working on a new novel?
Okay. I love them. I love all the characters. I love Sam's dad, for example, who is a troubled person. I see the good in him, and I think it's sort of like, it's a bit like being a parent. Like when you have your characters, you wouldn't pick your favorite child. Your characters are your creations, so you love them all, even the flawed ones. I have a real villain in the book that I'm working on now, which I won't tell you about, but it will be coming out in 2025. And I love him. He's evil, but I love him because I created him. And I'm interested. The thing is, I'm interested in them. I think if you are, to come back to the other question, if you're a writer, to be interested in people really helps. There are writers who write about animals, and there are writers who write about the environment and all different subjects. But my subject is people, and I'm very interested in them, their complexity, their flaws. I would say that none of the characters that I write is perfect. None of them is completely lovable, but who is? We all have our problems, and writing about it is one way to address it. So even people who seem aggravating in real life, I have a character named Rose Markowitz. You wouldn't want to spend a lot of time with her in real life. You wouldn't want to be her child and listen to her go on and on and on. But she becomes delightful in her absurdity in some of the stories that I've written. So it gives you that kind of distance to write about things. And that's actually something, if you're a writer, you might want to think about that. If something's really aggravating you or somebody makes you crazy, writing about it might be an interesting way to address that. And to mediate those feelings and to sort of see them in a whole way and to see them with perspective. So that's a long answer to your question. Oh, there's one.
I just wanted to say that I think that this is like the first time I met an author, and I just wanted to ask, like, from being a young girl, do you think you were really quiet? And I think that it may have made you like a really good author to just write what you have observed, just because from what the age that I am right now, I feel like I observe a lot and I'm very quiet and I always tend to write a lot. So I just like wanted to ask you, like, do you think that made you want to write a lot from just being a 12-year-old girl?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are all kinds of writers, and hopefully you'll meet many more in your life. And some of them are going to be not quiet at all, and they'll be very outgoing, and some of them are more quiet and introverted. I think actually it does help as an observer to be quiet and watch and listen. I was a bit of an outsider growing up because I grew up in Hawaii. I don't look like I come from Hawaii. I have like really, really fair skin. And people thought I was different and they thought I was weird because I was pale and I didn't tan, I burned. And that was like a big issue for me growing up. And so I was sort of always on the outskirts. Like I was never popular. Like I was quiet and I read a lot and I watched people a lot. And I think there is an advantage to that. When you're quiet, you have time to think. And if you're writing a lot, that you have time to process things and think things through. It's good to be quiet and to be reflective if you're any kind of artist, I think. So yeah, I was that quiet kid. Quieter than Sam, for sure.
Anyone else? There's such great questions. I guess Allegra will sign.
We have a question in Lynn, please.
Oh. Danvers.
Hello.
Hi. And Terry Whitman, English department. Thank you very much for coming, first of all. I read your book, and I enjoyed it very much, and I think it'll be a huge hit with our students. And among the many things that I enjoyed about your book was the flow. And I wondered how you approached the organization of the book or the planning for the book. Whether you came upon, for example, the climate metaphor right away, and that gave you the ending. So I wondered whether you worked with an outline or how you plan it out. And then secondly, I wondered whether Netflix has approached you yet for a series.
Oh, wonderful questions. Yeah, that's such a good question. I was really interested in writing like a fast-paced book. And as I said, like just keeping you in the present and that it flows very fast. And one of the reasons I was interested in that is that I wanted to show how fast people grow up. So she grows really fast. It's like you've probably heard the expression like the days are long, the years are short, right? So it's richly detailed in the scenes, but it's very quick. And sometimes you'll go through a few years in a few pages in her life. So that was a goal of mine. I do outline all the time, but I make a lot of mistakes, so I have to change my outlines all the time. So I wish I could say like I had an outline, I knew exactly where everything was going to end up and what was going to happen to her from the beginning. And I definitely got stuck many times writing this book and really struggled with what was going to happen to her. And at one point, I called Sam my problem child. I used to call her my problem child because she was making me crazy. So it took me a long time to like figure out where she was going and sort of think my way into that. So I would say the first half of the book was a lot easier for me than the second half, and I didn't have it as well planned out as I could have. And some of the things that I thought about didn't work. And then in terms of, there are people who have approached me about a miniseries, so that we'll see. You know, a lot of books get optioned for television and movies, but rarely does anything actually come of that. Those things are very expensive and require many hoops to be jumped through by other people, so, so who knows? But thank you for your question. Yeah, when I get stuck, it's really hard. I think the best thing to do, and for any students here who get stuck writing something, whether it's for class or for your own work and you get really stuck, I'd suggest taking a little time away, if you have time. Even if it's short time, I realize that you have deadlines, and maybe then coming back to it. I think that really helps. What I've found to be counterproductive is just keep writing and pushing forward and not knowing what to do, because I end up just messing up and then just having to redo it all. So getting stuck, taking a step back, doing some thinking, sometimes showing your work to somebody else and getting feedback can really help when you get stuck. And they may ask a question, or they may say, "What happened to such and such?" And that will, re-spark you or restart you. So it's just part of the process. Yes?
How do you counter the fear of criticism?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think everybody has a fear of criticism, and that's normal, first of all. Nobody's brave enough that you don't care what anyone thinks. I think a lot of it has to do with, the person who asked the question about being quiet. There's quiet like being shy, and there's also quiet that you have to be inside yourself and inside your work and shut out voices. And you have to. And one of the ways that I counteract criticism is that I don't show my work until I'm ready to show it. So I don't like to show my rough drafts to people, and I've become more protective. I don't like to talk about stuff before it's published. I don't, because if you're half done with something and you show it to somebody and they're like, "Oh, you're doing that," and they look at you funny, even if they don't say anything critical, that could throw you off, because it's hard to do imaginative work. So I would say, shelter yourself during the creative process. There's a time and place for feedback and criticism, maybe when you get stuck, maybe if there's somebody you really trust. Also knowing who you want that feedback from. You might not want to show it to the most critical person you know. There are people I don't show my work to until it's, in print. And then there are people who, love everything that you do and don't give you enough advice. So it's tricky, right? You have to find the people you respect and that they respect you. And then at the end of the day, if something does go out there and into the world, you are going to get criticism, and not everyone's going to love your work, and you have to accept that, and you have to say, okay, Sam's gone off into the world. She's grown up now. I hope she makes good choices. I hope people treat her well. I hope she's strong enough to stand it when people don't treat her well. But she's done. She's gone. And you have to let go at that point. Yeah.
Some people say writers need community. I'm wondering, A, if you believe that, and B, how you create or find your community of writers.
It's hard to find a community when writing's very solitary, so sometimes it's hard to find that community. I have a few writer friends, and I appreciate talking to them about my work and stuff, but I'm not. Some people are just much more like they're in a writer's group and they exchange their work all the time, and I'm not like that. I don't do that, partly because I have to protect my work. But I think there are different ways to define community. You may have a community that's not writers, Sam has a community of climbers who are not going to college with her, but she finds them very nurturing and they support her, And another place to find community as a writer is as a reader. So if you're reading, first of all, you can find community with other readers, whether it's in class or outside of class or in a book group. You can also find community with people who are dead, if you're a reader, with those writers that you admire. If there's a poet that you really love, that you live by their words, that their work means so much to you, you're in communion with that person. You're in community with that person. So I would say the whole literary tradition is also a community open to anyone who chooses to step into it.
Okay, that was an amazing Q&A. You guys are fantastic.
We've actually got one more question.
Oh, we have one more. Good.
On the chat actually here that just came in. It says, "What career?" This is from Susan. "What career do you think Sam would choose using her geology?"
Oh yeah, such a good question. I mean, I kind of hope. I don't know. there's part of me that's like, oh, she should be a scientist. She should go to UMass Amherst. Like, this is like the mom in me. Like, then get a PhD, then become a researcher. But, you know, who knows? Sam's also really into the outdoors, and she might, like, want to be a surveyor or something like that, or work for the Park Service or something like that. So, you know, I think it's just like as a parent, you don't want your kid to necessarily be you. You know, a writer is, you have to think about what would be something for Sam. You know, I could see her as a park ranger, honestly, even. So I think the idea is that she has many careers open to her at this point. Yes?
I just thought of another question. So, I'm not sure if you have ever written works that deal with social change of areas that you're very painful of, and you have to deal with very painful or traumatic material. How do you push through the research and the crafting process of these kind of materials and topics?
You mean sort of like traumatic material, like?
Yeah, for example, say if you have to write about the Nanking slaughter of World War II, during the World War II in China, how do you process that material and how do you put that on paper?
That's a really good question. I have not written about something like that, so I can't. I think you'd have to talk to a different writer, because there are people who write about that sorts of things, those sorts of things. So I haven't done that kind of research, and I haven't done that kind of writing. I imagine that it takes a lot of courage to confront material like that, and also a lot of skill to figure out how to convey that to people. And so I think you'd have to like look for somebody who did that kind of writing.
Okay, going once. Anything on Zoom? Allegra will be signing books. Thank you all for... Absolutely. Talk to me after. Allegra will be signing books. Thank you for coming, and please participate in Arts in April, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.